popular to call these cold case files these days, murders that remain unsolved decades later. This one's from 1958, one of the most interesting years for news in ages. The BC Centennial's on, Princess Margaret's opening the new bridge at Kelowna, and terrorist bombers are blowing up railways, power poles, bus depots right here in the Okanagan. But in early August, the murder of a young woman in Caledon triggers extraordinary and tragic events that create headlines across the nation. She came to Canada to meet the man she wrote letters to, a young woman on an adventure away from her home in East Germany, a victim for whom there has been no justice. In fact, justice has been denied for all the victims that ensued from the murder of Anite Budde. Telling the story is newspaperman Stephen Tuck. Justice denied, but victims remembered in this episode of Pioneers and Places. Welcome to Pioneers and Places. Mike Roberts with my storyteller for tonight, Steve Tuck. Steve Tuck has been the publisher of Kelowna Courier, is the publisher of Forever Young, a news magazine for 50 plus. So I was looking for a grizzled newspaperman to help me tell this story. And did you, I don't know, did you sense your blood beginning to boil and the hair on the back of your neck stand up as you look through the papers of 1958, Herald and Courier?
Well, I think you know, as you go through this story, you just find it's such an interesting story. It's the making of an Agatha Christie novel. Yeah. It goes here, there, and everywhere, and it's just there are so many improbables and impossibles.
Yeah, it is the story of murder, deceit, and really lunacy in the South Okanagan. 1958, big news year, lots of major big black headlines. But what kind of headlines occurred on that Monday morning?
Well, on Monday, August the 4th, all of a sudden the headlines were in red ink. And the headlines were all about the prior day's murder of one Anite Budde, who was found brutally murdered in a picker's cabin in Caledon.
The police are on the scene. They're interviewing witnesses. And who do they most immediately go for? What leads are they given?
Well, to start off with, Anite Budde had 4 visitors the previous day, all gentlemen. Maybe we should say who she was.
Sure.
Very interesting lady. She was a German immigrant who had worked a number of months as a steno in hospitals, at 2 different hospitals in Vancouver. She had someone in Caledon, a gentleman friend, who had invited her to come up, and there was certainly some romance. He'd asked her to marry him, although her friends will learn later on were trying to dissuade her from that, and she had someone else in mind. She's 28 years old, very attractive, and so she'd been in Caledon about 3 weeks. When she was very brutally murdered. The police say fractures to her head, to her body. It was a pretty bloody mess.
The photos we have are of a little picker's cabin on this property. We see her shoes on the doorstep. We also see the Speedflex camera that must have been used to take pictures of the crime scene. And who becomes a person of immediate interest to the police?
Well, it seems that there was one man who was supposed to have dinner with her, and one of the other foursome, who was the renter of the property, had asked him to leave the property. And so the one we're talking about and who becomes the key suspect, his name is Morrison, John Morrison.
He's described, as I remember it, as a big man who is often seen speaking loudly to himself.
Yes, And also, as we're going to learn, he is very adept at survival in the woods. He claimed, I guess he's worked 2 different summers that we know of on this same farm. He's pretty well known in town. He's thought to really know his way around the woods. Actually later on this day, he was seen at the Quality Cafe having lunch.
Quality Cafes in Summerland.
In Summerland. And the one thing that they said afterwards in reporting this to the RCMP was that normally he liked to talk a lot. But this day he just stuck his head in and left. And so there's some suspicion. He was reported to the RCMP, and there was an encounter a little later on. A Corporal Ralph Brown found Morrison.
And that's the subject of more shocking headlines when subscribers to the Herald and the Courier open the page the next day.
And what we find out is that Morrison shot Corporal Brown, shot him through the hand, and a second bullet went in behind his ear and lodged near his spine. And so Morrison escapes.
Brown is wounded.
Brown is wounded.
But he's capable of seeking help.
And he gets to the home of someone who is called Mrs. Elsie. And he gets there, blood apparently all over the place. He's telling her, you know, like, look, you got to call for help. I need help. And she's trying to invite him to come in and sit down and have a cup of tea. She composes him.
And he's obviously resistant to this kind of mothering. And he tells her, listen, I have to get the identity of my assailant to my associates, and finally convinces her to take him to town.
Right. And so they wind up going off to the detachment, get medical help. But now, of course, this has turned into something much bigger, because now, obviously, as we see even the next day in the newspaper, is that the headlines get really big, because now the Mounties are out to get their man. One of their own has been shot, and we're going to move into one of the largest manhunts, probably the largest that ever took place in the South Okanagan.
We're going to come back and talk about that huge manhunt and some other almost inconceivably improbable events right after this word. Don't go away.
Save it for a rainy day.
In the news this hour, first to the Okanagan, where a murder investigation is underway of a female in Penticton. Police are tightly...
Welcome back to Pioneers in Places. Mike Roberts and Steve Tuck talking about the Anite Budde murder. You can't go around shooting police officers without attracting a lot of attention from the members of the force.
Exactly, and now we've got everybody looking for Morrison. We've got vigilantes, posses. There's pictures, as we'll see, great pictures out on the horses, riding through Giant's Head.
You got a Jeep with generator mounted and lights into the dark.
Right, and now we're going to lead into probably the biggest tragedy that really is unbelievable, and that is that the Mounties come in with a Beaver plane, and there are 3 of them taking off from Skaha Lake. And they're about 1,000 feet over Skaha Lake, and the plane crashed while they're searching for Morrison, and all 3 of the Mounties are killed.
Wow. And these pictures of the wreckage on Skaha Bluffs, this must be a national news story by now. I mean, this is the manhunt of the century.
I'm sure that W. Beaver Jones, the reporter of the day, who climbed 1,000 feet to go and get the pictures of the wreckage, they're plastered all over the front page of the Daily Courier. He talks about smelling the flesh of the people who were burned in the wreckage. It's a pretty
Very
brutal,
graphic, brutal story.
Yeah, for sure. Now I'm sure we can imagine we've got we've got a corporal who was shot in the first place, we've got a dead woman who hasn't been buried yet, and we've got 3 police officers killed. All of this has taken place in a matter of, what, 6 days?
Yeah.
5-6 days.
The hills are alive with loggers and ranchers and militiamen armed searching for Morrison, and along comes Frank McDonald.
Frank McDonald, exactly, and he's such an interesting character because we really have to see how probably he helped to heat up what must have been a very, very intense situation. You know, we've got people who are really worried, obviously. They've got a killer on the loose. These other events have all taken place. We still haven't found Morrison, who's suspected as the killer. They talk about the fact that all the people who were involved, the townsfolk that is, in the valley, were out working all day helping do the search, but they were awake all night long with guns at the ready because they wanted to protect themselves and their families.
Yeah.
And along comes Frank McDonald, and Frank McDonald is a real upstanding individual, lives in West Summerland. He owns a business. He's been the president of the local Kiwanis, and you know, his curriculum vitae reads like Mr. Citizen of the Year, no doubt about it. And all of a sudden, on the 6th and the 8th of August, he comes along with stories to the police about the fact that his house has been burglarized, that clothes have been taken, food's been taken, and so the police continue their search right locally, anticipating, based on what McDonald has told them, that Morrison is still right there.
Oh. But they discover pretty quick that there has been no break-in at Frank McDonald's house.
By Saturday, August 9th, the headline now is that McDonald has been charged by the RCMP with mischief.
What's the deal with McDonald?
They finally discover through the trial that when he appeared that he has mental problems. He is a schizophrenic, and that he goes into deep depressions. And when he's in these deep depressions, he likes to make up stories, and this gets him attention. And that's what this all seems to have been about, was that he wanted to share some of the headlines.
They send him for psychiatric examination at Cree's Clinic, and it must just shock the community. How does the police recover from this? They've been looking over here for Morrison when Morrison could be anywhere else.
Now they have to expand their manhunt. They recognize that there's a darn good chance that he's got away. You know, there have been different things happening. They've tried to capture different people. There was a story, for instance, about a man at 2 o'clock in the morning going over the Trout Creek trestle, and they took shots at him. But it turns out that none of these was likely Morrison. The word has gone out now as the manhunt has expanded, and the inspector in charge, who's been brought up from Chilliwack, has got everybody armed but told them all they're to make sure that they don't shoot Morrison. He wants him taken alive.
Where do they look for him?
Well, they've now decided to start heading south. They're pretty sure that he's made his way through the southern corridor into Washington State. And so, you know, now looking at it, it seems hard to believe, because we've got the RCMP actually going into Washington State across the border. We've got the Border Patrol, and we've got the Washington Sheriff's Office, all cooperating together in Washington Territory looking for Morrison.
And they find him.
And they find him. They find him in a swamp, and there's a struggle. And I think what's really interesting is that it's one of the RCMP, Constable Stu Langdon out of Enderby, who winds up in a struggle. They're knee-deep in mud in this swamp, and he winds up shooting Morrison through the hip. He takes intestinal, bladder, all kinds of
things out with a shot.
Yeah, with the shot, exactly. And so the next thing we find is that Morrison is now under police protection in a hospital in Tonasket, Washington. Well,
who does Morrison turn out to be?
Now that's when the story really does get convoluted.
Like it wasn't bad enough already.
Wasn't bad enough already, because now Morrison tells them that his name really isn't John Morrison, That's the name he goes under when he's in the Okanagan. They come up with yet another name for him, Donald Stevens. And it's discovered as well that he is an American citizen. But then the story goes on even farther because now Morrison Stevens tells them, I have a million aliases. My name is really Sprangenberg, and I'm escaped from an insane asylum in Pennsylvania.
And he's in hospital in Tonasket, and the case against him as the murderer of Anite Budde begins to collapse.
It does. It turns out that he had escaped while being transferred from one insane asylum to another in Pennsylvania 12 years previously, in 1946.
All this time, while all this is going on in Washington State, there is, of course, an inquest going on in Penticton into the death of Anite Budde, where all sorts of details come out about her. And it's this inquest which is pivotal to the police suddenly coming up with perhaps another suspect in this case.
Right. One of the people we met earlier, Olin LeBrag, who was the man renting the farm on which Morrison worked and Budde worked, now he's at the inquest, and there are a lot of questions coming out. A lot of questions leading to why he was so busy trying to get the finger pointed at Morrison. And now the police are getting really suspicious. And indeed, he now becomes the focus of their investigation as the chief suspect into the murder of Anite Budde.
And he is placed under arrest, and all sorts of things are discovered about him. And we'll talk about what we discover about Olin LeBrag, if that is indeed his name,
yes,
after this break.
Well, Harriet, I've got this whole big part to learn.
You can study right...
Hey, are you on? We interrupt this broadcast to bring you breaking news out of Penticton this hour. 3 RCMP members are dead following a plane crash.
Welcome back to Pioneers in Places. Mike Roberts and Steve Tuck talking about the murder of Anite Budde. Olin LeBrag, as a result of the inquiry, is charged with the murder of Anite Budde. And Morrison, Stephen Sprangenberg, finally does get extradited from the United States to Canada. How long does all this take? What months are we talking about here after this murder in August?
Well, the murder was on August the 4th, and now we're up to December the 9th.
Justice is moving slowly.
Pretty slowly.
Now, of course, look at Sprangenberg. This is how he looks as he's leaving Tonasket to come to Penticton.
Right, he's been through all kinds of surgery, putting him back together again, and now they're bringing him back in a police car.
He doesn't look comfy, but he is kind of playing to the camera.
Yeah, but he doesn't look too comfortable, you're right.
Yeah. Comes back to Penticton. LeBrag has been charged with the murder of Anite Budde. When did the court cases finally get started? Where should we deal with first, the murder of Anite Budde? Or should we deal with the assault on the police officer?
Well, that one was pretty interesting and really went by awfully quickly because they wind up with the fact that Morrison's insane, and just there isn't too much to that trial.
He couldn't have formulated intent. He probably shot the police officer because he was frightened.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens with Morrison, the police assaulter?
He's declared insane during this trial and finally extradited back to the States.
What happens with Olin LeBrag, charged with the Anite Budde murder?
That's, I think, one of the, I think it's a miscarriage of justice, really, as you pursue it, because we wind up in the courtroom, and he is charged. He, says that he's innocent. He was in love with Anita. He asked her to marry him a number of times. And so we finally find out that he is charged with her murder. And now we go on to April. So we've gone from December, where he's formally charged, he's locked up, and now we get to April 20th, and at that point, we're in the Vernon courtroom now. And there's a new justice, Mr. Justice Wilson, who is overseeing this case.
And what comes out in the court case? What's the evidence against Olin LeBreg?
Well, the key evidence, it turns out, are a couple of pieces of hair in the victim's hands. And that's what's really interesting, is because all of the forensic people are all testifying this is the key evidence. And when we finally get to the end of 3 days of hearings, we find ourselves with the judge spending a whole hour charging the jury on the fact that this evidence is inconsequential. He said the hairs could have been placed there by anyone else, they could have got there by all sorts of different ways, and basically charges the jury with the fact that he doesn't think that this evidence is sound enough to convict. And so after they listened to the judge for an hour, the jury went away, and 16 minutes later came back and acquitted.
So no one is convicted of the murder of Anite Budde. What happens to Olin LeBreg? Who do we find out Olin LeBreg is?
Well, now we find out that he is an escaped parolee from Los Angeles.
And Olin LeBreg, not only was he escaping parole, but he was convicted of murder and had been serving a life sentence in California.
Right.
So here is this, he's no milquetoast. He's no gentle, loving character. He's already killed somebody and been convicted of it.
And you know, none of that I know of came out during the trial. It came out later on.
And so he's just extradited, and it all supposed to go away. No justice for Anite Budde.
None whatsoever.
That's what's important about us doing this show. At least we remember the victim.
Yeah.
This is a classic cold case file, isn't it? What did you think as a publisher, a newspaper publisher yourself? What did you think? How did you feel as you went through the pages of the Penticton Herald and this story was playing out like a Tom Clancy novel to you?
Yeah. Well, I thought it was an Agatha Christie novel, but you and I read different books. Yeah. But, you know, it was just incredible to see because, you know, we kept moving in different circles between the characters who were involved, and it really was a mystery novel.
And just so gripping, starting with the red headlines and ending with a little tiny filler at the bottom of the page in June, nearly a year later, saying, everything's just gone away.
That's right.
Very unsatisfying.
And I think it's something that you said earlier, you know, if you're going to commit a murder, maybe this is the place to do it.
Yeah, a person came up to me and said, you know, if you want to commit a murder and get away with it, do it in the Okanagan, because there wasn't a judge in the Okanagan who dropped the hammer, who dropped the gavel on anybody. Isn't that weird? Thank you for telling the story, though, and thank you for being here for Pioneers in Places, and remember, Anite Budde. We'll see you again next time on another subject.